Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald! Timber!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. Oh, they can't believe that.
Good time of day. This is episode 163 of Americans Watching the Footy, our round 6 recap. Benjamin Castle here alongside my brother Ethan. Hope you enjoyed the non-9 game rounds while they lasted. Sadly, still an overlap.
This coming week we won't have an overlap, but that's preview talk, and this is recap time. Yeah, it's recap time.
Oh, that's hot.
Common themes from the round?
Not really. I don't sense too many common themes. I think there are a couple of things about this round that I'm really looking forward to discussing.
Okay, I actually have some common themes. Well, they've really been common themes for the whole year. The fuck is holding the ball, and the fuck are we reviewing?
There was one review yesterday in, I think, the North Hawthorne game,
where it was a very clear goal.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck are we looking at? Like, if you can't figure that out, you shouldn't be a goal umpire.
My question is, considering everything is looked at in the 45 seconds or so it takes to go back to the center bounce, why do they even need to call for reviews? It's almost like how in rugby, where every try is confirmed by the bunker.
But what I think you should do with this one, depending on how confident you are, if it's a goal, the goal umpire should either tell them, take it back to the middle, take it halfway, or stay there.
Ethan Castle, unlikely voice of reason.
That's not how the jingle goes, but I'll allow it.
I mean, your logic is pleasing.
Yeah, but you completely fucked up the song.
St. Kilda 9-10-64 defeated by Western Bulldogs 19-10-124. Aaron Naughton is a forward.
There are two different ways to look at this game from the Bulldogs' perspective. One of them is Luke Beveridge had a master plan all along with sitting some of his veterans to send a message. I do not agree with that.
Also, I thought Caleb Daniel was supposed to be in.
Yeah, my view is this team can play like this all the time. I mean, yes, this was probably like a 99th percentile version of them, but like Luke Beveridge is the reason this doesn't happen more frequently, because this team is fucking good.
And it starts with having the obvious people in the midfield. Let's just jump in right away and start praising Jack McRae. Unlike the coaches?
Yeah, I don't know how he got no coaches votes. He was the best player in this game. He was great in the middle. You look like back to when they played the Cats in the... Gather round. And you see how, with him out there, they're just so much better at clearances. And remember, this was without Libba. Libba was in concussion protocol for his ankle injury.
30 disposals, only 10 contested, but he was often allowed to get out into open space in the first place. So that's credit to him there for his movement.
He was really good on clearances.
He had 5 of them directly, and when others like Adam Treloar, who had 9, got them, he was often one of the first couple guys to get the ball afterward. Bontempelli and Treloar got a bit more of the ball in the contest, but McRae was the one who actually made plays happen after the contest themselves.
The Bulldogs at their best, I think, are better than just about any other team at their best, with the exception of maybe the Lions.
Over the Cats at their best?
Yeah, I think so. But it's just like, why doesn't this happen more? It's so frustrating, because this team has talent, and a lot of it.
Another thing that I'll say is, with Caleb Daniel being out, it did mean that Bailey Dale got a lot more of the ball at the halfback, often going out toward the flank and putting on some smart kicks. Yeah, how about 39 of those disposals along with 15 marks?
I will say, I didn't think he was, incredible by any stretch.
He was incredible for my fantasy.
I think it was ridiculous that he was considered, the best by the coaches' votes over McRae, but I thought Dale was good. I think there were a lot of good players in this game from Bulldogs' perspective. I do still think it's frustrating, a bit of a down game for Latham Vandermeer, who Probably he's going to struggle to hold on to his spot by no fault of his own. But you know who I think my favorite player was in terms of like expected output versus what they actually did?
I expected the output from Riley Garcia. The fuck are you talking about?
Did you?
Yes, I've been calling for his inclusion for weeks.
He was awesome, just like getting into the middle of crowded sequences. He was heavily involved with pretty much everything. I really liked this performance out of him, and I think he added a necessary spark.
Had the pressure going both ways into and out of the contest, 9 contested possessions and 6 tackles for Garcia, helping complete that midfield mix. It's always been a question of what kind of the lower tiers of the Bulldogs list look like. I think Garcia at this point, is up into that middle tier if he's actually allowed the time. So what do you do now with Riley Garcia now that Liberatore is coming back, and after Trelawney had such a strong contested game as well? I think it would be hard to move any of those out of the middle. It's a good problem for any coach other than Luke Beveridge to have.
I think the proper solution is just manage guys and like let it solve itself, but
Like have Garcia be first off the bench.
yeah, and some weeks you give one of your veterans a game off. I think there are ways to handle this. Again, this is not the coach that I think will solve this and figure it out, because that's just not what he does.
Another question here about the Bulldogs list. Rory Lobb may not have kicked a goal, but was a strong field mark, and that was the biggest thing that the Bulldogs needed, especially once Naughton caught fire.
Yeah, I think Lobb's presence really let Naughton do a lot more, and Lobb was more involved in the full field, whereas Naughton was more involved in just the forward 50. I think you got to try to find a way. I don't know if there is a way, but you got to try at least to find a way to play both Lobb and Jamara. And I think this is a team that, like, the talls are good enough that you can just play a super tall lineup. So maybe just going off who the weak links were in this game, I guess you take out, like, Latham Vandermeer.
Vandermeer was subbed out. I still want to give more opportunities to Jimmy O'Donnell, but he didn't rank super high.
Well, I think one of O'Donnell or Bramble should be out completely and the other should be the sub, because you should have Caleb Daniel in there. So I think, first off, I would not have Riley Sanders as a sub. I would have him getting full games.
And you'd have Caleb Daniel straight into the 22 again.
Yeah. So you bring in Daniel, Libba, and Jamara. By the way, Jamara missed this game for personal reasons. Hope everything's all right. Take out Vandermeer, O'Donnell, and
Bramble,
I guess, and maybe Harms was all right. I would maybe make Harms the sub then.
I think Vandermeer is also the right sort of pick for a sub because of his versatility. I would be fine with keeping Harms out, honestly, especially because you've got to find a way to get someone from that inside mix outside a little bit.
Harms played some inside stuff, though. I think he's able to play inside and out. I like what he did alongside Riley Garcia.
But he's a step below the rest of those, I think.
I thought he had a solid enough game, though. O'Donnell was like one of the only downsides in this game. He had a couple of bad turnovers. It was just like, I don't understand process of lineup decisions.
One thing I do like from their halfback rank, though, is Ed Richards getting more time, taking the ball upfield, starting plays through the corner. I think that was one of his better traits in this game, and it's something that we've noticed be a positive for him over the past couple of years. So,
well, I said after the game against Geelong they're at their best when he plays well, and just like his performance is a barometer for them.
18 disposals, only 199 meters gained, but a lot of ground was gained from the next possessions after he gave the ball off.
And only one turnover. I think that's the most important stat, is the one turnover.
Saints were definitely turnover prone in this one. That came back to bite them.
They didn't, however, have any lazy kicks get taken away in their own end. So actually, the Saints covered one of the two major problems they had. The one that they didn't was the slow starts that turned into playing like shit for almost the entire game. I mean, it was 100-28 midway through the third. Teams traded the first 2 goals, and then the Bulldogs closed the first on a 37-0 run. Saints had a nice little push to create some life in the second, and then Dogs closed the first half on a 24-7 run, and that was pretty much it. This was an unbelievably flaccid performance from the Saints. The list of positives for them: Hugo Garcia in his first full game.
The 2 Garcias in AFL history faced off. There is no relation, I believe.
Marcus Windhager was decent. Brad Hill was all right. This was a game that makes you question, does their style leave them prone to just getting run over by a team with more energy. And if this continues, it's worth really investigating that.
They show the ability to play at higher tempos themselves, but it's definitely not their preferred style.
But what's weird in this game, usually, even in those lower scoring games, they're able to still, their speed limits what other teams do. In this game, they didn't show off any of their speed or anything. They looked like a wooden spoon caliber team in this game. If they told me this would have happened to them last year, because I thought they were going to be the shits, I wouldn't have been surprised.
I think part of what limited them from having a lot of speed was just getting trounced from the center bounce. 16-9 center clearances favored the Bulldogs. The Saints don't usually have a whole lot of fast plays from the back half. Usually they let Callum Wilkie just dictate slower play out of defense, and Wilkie was quiet in this game and beaten one-on-one.
He was not good, which is rare, but just further reinforces, there's a top level of defender.
And Wilkie is below that tier.
Yeah, there's the S tier and then the A tier.
I think Wilkie would be like A-.
I don't know. Last year, he was close to S tier. It was also a bad game for Zane Cordy, I thought. But, because it's look, there's Stewart, there's Taylor, there's everybody else. Jeremy McGovern might be up pretty high. Starting to think Charlie Coleman, maybe?
Jack Buckley.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about Cal Wilkie.
But the point I was making was that the Saints aren't the type of team to rebound super quickly from the defensive 50. They usually do that from the center square. And when they couldn't get great possession out of the center, of course they didn't go as quickly. Friday night in South Australia, cue the Crows heartbreak again. Adelaide 11-9-75, defeated by Essendon 10-18-78.
Were the Crows robbed?
Right in front of us. I still can't tell. And also, I'm just going to say it right now, Sam Draper is staying in for Anzac Day. That's been confirmed by Brad Scott.
Whoa.
I know this is some preview talk, but they're going to be tall against Collingwood. Draper and Goldstein, as well as the return at that point of 2-meter Peter Wright.
Maybe they manage somebody like Goldstein? I hope they don't. He's been playing well, but he is older. It's a quick turnaround. So
I would think not, especially going up against the combination of Cox and Cameron, because I don't think you'd put Peter Wright up against either of them. This felt for a while like Essendon were taking on the role of the Crows from last year, where they could not kick straight to save their souls, and it was going to come back to bite them. And then it ended up not doing that.
So let's just cut to the end. The controversy over whether he was holding the ball on Sam Draper, I think it was in the gray area.
And thus, it's not a call that you're going to make that quickly in the final moments.
I'm a believer that games need to be officiated the same way from start to finish.
I think
one exception.
We went over this last week. What is the exception?
When it's a blowout, you can try to just move a game along. That's the one exception I'll make.
The winning goal came from Nick Martin from 55 meters out with a little under 8 minutes to go.
I thought this was one of his better games.
I mean, Martin was just functional all over the ground. In terms of the inside grunt, I actually give major props to Jai Caldwell.
I think with Martin, they're still trying to figure out what role is best for him. And I just think he's wasted just roaming around the back. I think that's where you use Andrew McGrath. I think Martin gives you something on the wing. I think he gives you something just in the midfield in general. He'd just be wasted taking the ball out.
In a Harry Sheasel type way, we could say.
Yeah, I mean, he's not Sheasel. He's not that good, but he's good.
And he's not going to be the centerpiece around which a team builds. Martin had a lot more of that uncontested wing game, which was to be expected considering what Sam Durham has done to establish himself on the inside, as well as the aforementioned Jai Caldwell with 26 disposals, 11 contested possessions, and an octopus to surprisingly be the forefront of the Essendon center group and their pressure. Did not expect Caldwell to be that type of figure. I think of him as more bridging the gap between the midfield and half forward, a little further up, maybe just off the center square it bounces. But I like having that extra grunt in there, especially against a Crows midfield group that has shown their ability to flex a lot of strong contested players in.
This is a game I had to watch a second time to really figure out much of anything from in terms of individual takeaways. And even so, I'm still left with more questions than answers. A couple of big questions, but let's start with the individual ones. One of the things I took away was that this was a very good game for Nick Cox. He didn't have like the best numbers by any means, but I just really liked the way he performed. Seemed like every touch he had out of his 16 were like all high impact, efficiency over 80%. It was kind of like the sort of game that I associate Zach Guthrie with right now, just like very high IQ in the right spot at the right time. Because other than that, there were a lot of guys who like, there were very few consistent presences in this game, and he was one of them. I think most other guys, was like either had 3 good quarters or 1 or 2 good quarters. He was, I think, the most consistent presence on the winning side. This was also definitely Jordan Dawson's best game, despite the loss. Just his accuracy on long kicking and his vision was really good. But the Essendon defenders stood up. Really good game from Ben McKay, I thought. Or McKay. I think it should be McKay, but his choice.
I guess you're not bothered by that as much as you are McGrath.
Yeah, that one bugs me a lot more. Because I've heard other people name McKay, like in America, a real country, that doesn't sim for the British as much. Oh, it is funny, though, that apparently Prince Harry is, like, renouncing his British citizenship. And it's like, I don't give a shit about the royal family, but also taking something that means so much to them. It's like beating Canada in hockey, or beating the British in any of the 50 sports they invented that they suck at.
That magical day when the U.S. beats England for the first time in Test cricket.
Oh, my God. That's going to be incredible. What was I saying before? Oh, great BK. Wait, McKay, bet.
It's been
Totally shut down Taylor Walker. Walker, 12 disposals, 1 goal. He did have 2 assists, but his impact was limited, especially closer to goal.
Only 3 actual marks for McKay, but so many one-on-one wins.
And I think he had like 9 intercepts.
Yep, that does it. This is a game where if you just look at the stat sheet, it does not tell the story of his impact that much, if at all.
I mean, it goes for like Kyle Langford with his 2-2. And a couple of plays where he dropped back defensively late. Or Jake Kelly, who started the game really strong, ended up with just 17 disposals. Like, Jaden Laverne had maybe 1 bad mistake all night.
I think structurally, Essendon made the right moves.
Yeah. I thought this was probably Mason Redmond's best game of the year so far.
Funny that it happened back in his home state after dissuading all the trade talk.
But yeah, Essendon, despite being the better team and putting themselves in a position where they probably should have won this game by a lot more, and 19 more inside 50s, most of the best individual performers were Crows, starting with, like I said, Dawson. I know you really like Jake Saligo. I thought Josh Worrell was pretty good.
Worrell has really asserted himself as their strongest tall defender at the moment, and that's especially important with no Tom Duday anymore, and Nick Murray still recovering from his own torn ACL. I've said for a bit now that Worrell and Michael Lanning, that's a combination there between tall and small defender around which you can really build a back unit. And I saw a good mix of young defenders in general this week. I've talked up Saligo a lot. I think these past 2 weeks have probably been his best 2 at the AFL level. And while he has been able to stay in the middle and do his best work there, I think that's allowed everybody else around him to get rotated a bit more and keep everybody else fresh.
I thought both teams did a good job getting the ball out of their own 50s, other than there was one pretty bad turnover that led to a goal. I think it was Laverde's hit. I'm gonna figure this out. You keep talking, then I'm just gonna interrupt you when I figure it out.
Yeah, I liked how both clubs were able to move the ball out of 50. It was more getting good entries inside 50 where the Crows continually let themselves down. It's not just that Adelaide were minus 19 inside 50. It was also that, especially in the fourth quarter, they were really unorganized and just didn't put on smart kicks at all. They tried too much into some packs and then found it. And then a lot of other times there were just a lot of short kicks that disappointed. And I guess I'll leave my comments on Josh Rochelle until after this. Whose kick was it?
It was Laverde. He was kicking for Xavier Dersma, and Chase Jones just kind of took it and ran it in. That was during that stretch where first you had that delay 50 against Draper that led to a run of 3 straight goals. It was one of those I know it wasn't intentional, but you had to call it. And that seemed to be a big turning point. Also, when the Crows kicked 4 goals in a row to go up 19 in the third, and then they couldn't continue the momentum off that. And then the Bombers got it into the forward 50 and didn't turn it into goals. Well, the Crows couldn't do much getting it ahead, which again, credit to the Essendon defense. Speaking of ball movers with Adelaide, I thought this was a really good game for Mitch Hinge.
The typical chaotic defenders that we think of were not chaotic this round.
We have a Frost ball moment finally, but he's been good.
So touching on Rochelle now, he's already berated himself for not being aggressive enough inside 50, not being keen enough to enter the tough spaces. This is a big learning experience for him. These past few Crows losses, I've noticed him kind of backing away from contests. And if you can get him and Isaac Rankin both being aggressive on ball, not just in the center square, but in the forward 50, everything else is going to open up for Adelaide from there, because you're going to need to have more people paying attention to him in the important moments. And so other guys will get freed up. Maybe it'll allow for some of the other taller targets like Darcy Fogarty to get some closer angles.
Rochelle had an interesting game where he got a lot of the ball, but just didn't finish well. But I still think there was a lot for him to build off. Got to do a better job just, not dropping a mark in the forward 50 and kicking between, those two big poles instead of the, one of the big poles and one of the smaller poles.
And then also actually being willing to be in the contest when it matters.
Yeah, this team was frustratingly close.
I mean, that's just kind of the story of the Crows the past year and change now.
So the Crows are 1-5, and I think they're kind of turning a corner. Like, I thought outside of the forward 50, they played a decent game,
but they're
1-5.
Yeah, I was going to say, even with some very winnable games coming up, North out at Blundstone Arena on Friday, because you've got to have an Anzac round game in Tasmania. Usually that's Hawthorn, though, in Launceston. That's a surprise.
That showdown, and home showdown, which, again, that matters for some reason.
I mean, they swept them last year, so we'll see if that does continue to matter. And then they've had the Brisbane Lions number in Adelaide. That is a big one there on, I guess it would be the 12th for most people, the 11th of May for us.
But it's just what I've said about teams that have had slow starts. And I mean, other than the game at Collingwood round 10, this is a really favorable stretch of schedule.
You got all the bottom four in that mix, and some questionable home games where you want to back them in more because they're at home. Imagine if they actually get to beat the Swans at home in round 15.
I said that's going to be the game. I just randomly picked it. It seems like it's going to be the game where it's like, the where the fuck has this been all year? So yeah, after that Collingwood game, home against the Eagles, at Hawthorn, home against the Tigers, home against the Swans. They could conceivably win 6 of these next 8 and get into the bye at 7-7. And I still just think they'd be behind the 8 ball, and then they've got a tougher stretch coming out of it. Also, is Essendon good? I really can't decide. And I think like on the, if there was an is Essendon good meter, it would literally just point at the is Essendon good. They've had games like the one against the Saints where they looked like shit but won. They're 4-2. I mean, the Bulldogs win was a good win. That's their one win that really stands out. They don't have what I would consider a bad loss. I mean, they got crushed by Port, but that's not a game you expected them to win. This team right now seems like a team that sneaks their way into like one of the last 2 spots
and that continues their streak.
Yep. Get like blown off the field in the elimination final. I know it probably feels like I've been going on about this game forever, but we also need to talk about the fly. Sometime in the third quarter, there is a video of like Matthew Nicks making a pretty shitty attempt at swatting away a fly that was in his box that had been sitting on his head. And I don't get how he didn't notice it sooner, because like it was fucking huge. I don't care how locked in I am on something. If there's a giant fly landing on my head, I'm going to notice that. So from fly in the coach's box to fly, was he in the coach's box or on the sideline? I think he was on the sideline. He's usually on the sideline, right?
He usually is. Collingwood 17-21-123, defeating Port Adelaide 12-9-81. This game took a dramatic turn in the second quarter when Collingwood responded to a 6-goal opening from Port to a 6-goal term of their own.
They were down 51-22, and then they closed the first half on a 41-0 run.
And you knew from that point up that this is not a game Collingwood's going to drop.
Yeah, especially since Leo didn't give us Collingwood can't lose from here.
We asked him for it, but
I don't even know if it would have made a difference.
I mean, we don't have that sort of power, though. We can't say that and make things happen. It's Leo's thing.
No, what I can do is if I talk about someone being really shitty, they usually turn it around and play better.
Especially like a player you like. If it's a player you dislike and you rag on them, then they don't have as much a chance of bouncing back.
If I say you've been playing like shit and you keep playing like shit, you know you're finished. Like Ed Curnow last year.
With Port managing Charlie Dixon, it meant that Jordan Sweet got his first game in, and I don't think it really worked.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think Jordan Sweet himself was bad.
No, and I liked the idea of being able to open up Yvonne Soldo's forward game more, but it just didn't work overall. This game was won by and large by the taller players from Collingwood. Darcy Cameron being the first-rate ruck, Mason Cox being free to do more as a better 4.5 mark and kicking a couple goals as well, and also shrugging off a Jason Horn-Francis tackle at one point. That was great. Darcy Moore better in defense, and Will Hoskin-Elliott still has it.
Yeah, the Talls won this game. Seems like something we can pretty much universally agree on.
Hoskin-Elliott looked, 6 years younger? 2-1 from 21 and 9 marks. Commanded the one-on-one matchups in which he found himself. Also, 13 score involvements. One behind Nick Dacos for the game lead, which is no small feat.
It was also definitely Mason Cox's best game so far this year.
Worth mentioning again because Americans watching the footy should take note of that.
Honestly, low bar to clear. He hadn't done much this year, but he was good. Hadn't kicked objectively good, not just better than his other games.
Hadn't kicked a goal before this. In terms of the less tall players for Collingwood, I really want to highlight Tom Mitchell because he didn't get much of the ball in the first half, but quietly was a really good defensive midfielder in the second quarter and helped turn the tide in there, cut off a lot of potential port chains, and then was a true contested leader from then on, finished with 14 for 1 off the game lead and had an octopus.
There were a few really negative performances for Port that need to be noted. I hate to say it because I love his hair.
It was actually, I believe, the first thing we tweeted about. Yes.
Lockie Jones has been unplayable, and he might have gotten hurt towards the end of this game. So there's your excuse. He just shouldn't be in there right now, unfortunately. I like the guy. I will campaign for him. He has not played well enough to merit a roster spot. Bad game for Asava. Mason totally outplayed him. And I think the solution there might have been to drop Soldo back because he can play in a defensive role. It's just, for that to happen at the same time as Charlie Dixon getting managed was really unfortunate for them. It was a decent game from Jason Horn-Francis. It was a good game from Zach Butters, but Ollie Wines was hardly noticeable and Connor Rosie was really invisible.
I think Mitchell winning the ball so much limited Rosie a lot because Rosie's able to burst out of the center square so often.
Also, Patrick Lipinski, 4 goals. Bobby Hill, 4 assists.
4 is a new career high for Lipinski.
Yeah, I think Hill, a couple of them he gave off that he could have taken himself. I'm sure Port, big picture, was not expecting to win this game, but at the same time,
the fashion in which they lost it after jumping out to the start that they did.
Yeah, they started really well, and it's just
that's what's going to stay, is that they couldn't keep that momentum.
And it raises the question, are these guys going to be able to beat top teams? Because that's been an issue for a while. They had a chance to really prove something in this game, and instead it just felt like more of the same, just with a different cast of characters struggling and succeeding, I guess. Kane Farrell and Willem Drew have not been as good the last few weeks. Need those two, really back up on their game.
Carlton, 17-15, 117, defeating Greater Western Sydney, 15-8, 98. First loss of the year for the Giants. By the way, I just want to say, the orange and white jumpers look way better under the artificial light. Actually excellent jumper clash in this game.
Yeah.
I was concerned, like I was in round 24 last year, that the Giants were going to really suffer without Sam Taylor. And yes, the Talls did get a lot of scoring shots. 3 goals each from Charlie Curnow, Tom DeConing, and Harry Mackay. And Curnow kicked 3-4, and those misses were pretty makeable ones. I just didn't realize how important structurally Lear was going to be, especially when he had a couple early losses to Mackay in that one-on-one. But really starting in the second quarter, he timed his entries into contests better, knew when to engage Mackay properly, and dude's got some vertical.
The broadcasters were fascinated by someone as big as him jumping like that, because it's one thing if a dude with a Buku Kamas type build does it, if we're looking at some of the other South Sudanese players, or Mac Andrew or something, or a Chankwath Jaff. It's different when it's someone who's muscular and kind of bulky and filled out like that. And when Mackay did get a couple quick goals in the later part of the third quarter, it was when Alir was on the bench and Harry Himmelberg wasn't able to match up against Mackay as well. What is it that kept the Giants from winning this game?
That Patrick Cripps and Sam Walsh were beasts in the middle. That's a start there because the Blues did not pressure pretty much at all in the first half, and it didn't really hurt them because they had enough wins out of stoppages. They were plus 16 in clearances, 48-32. How about 22-8 from the center? This was just a monster game from Cripps. I believe it was 39 disposals for him, 24 of them contested, 13 clearances, 8 of them from the center, 11 score involvements, and 7 tackles as well. This was the type of game that reminds you why this dude's a Brownlow medalist. It definitely did hurt to not have as many of the normal midfield cast in there for the Giants, particularly Stephen Cornelio being out with his MCL injury, but I'm not even sure how much he could have done when Cripps was just completely on it in this game. Tom Green had 30 and you didn't feel his presence. Josh Kelly did a bit more, may have been the Giants' best. We gave him the polished turd when he kicked 3 goals straight from 23.
So I have not watched this game in full yet. I've slept on and off through watching it in multiple stints. I have watched the first quarter in full twice now. And even just by the end of the first quarter and with what you've told me, it was pretty clear just Walsh and Cripps were absolutely dominant. So that going on for an entire game, just the kicking accuracy that Walsh had, Cripps' ability to run through the middle, you're going to have a tough day. I'm glad it was less the Giants' absences that decided this game and more just Carl's and Ernie. Because,
did it hurt that they didn't have Taylor in there? At times, did it hurt to not have Cornelio in there? Yes, even though Kelly made up for that somewhat. Kelly actually had 10 contested possessions and 6 clearances, but again, it just seemed like such a subordinate performance to Cripps in the center that it felt like he did more when he got to the outside. Also want to give huge credit to Matt Cottrell. Ever since Cal Toomey wrote that article praising the half forwards and they had a good segment on Cottrell, he has just had his very typical every possession matters games. From 12 disposals, Matt Cottrell had 8 score involvements and 4 inside 50s and also had 3 intercepts. The man is just everywhere he needs to be when he needs to be.
That's what company's slogan is everywhere you...
Visa had everywhere you want to be for a bit.
Might have been Visa.
Visa, everywhere you want to be. It's the type of performance from Cottrell that would make people get a number 46 Carlton jumper.
Yeah, I liked just kind of the thought of he didn't have the ball a ton, but you noticed every time he did.
Normally, if you're talking about a huge impact game with a dozen touches, it's usually a forward who kicks at least 3 goals. And getting back to the Carlton Talls, Michael Voss and company are really figuring out how to move around those Talls during the game. Mackay, even with his 3 goals, may have had even more value as a field mark overall. And Tom DeCrone follows up from the ruck into the forward 50 as well as any ruck in the AFL. It was a while before he was considered to be, a first-rate ruck anyway. And it's great to see him retaining that impact in both of the spots where he lines up, even with Mark Pitnet staying in. I'm almost surprised that the Blues have done so well with Pitnet in this tall mix as well. You think by and large that he would have been expendable as soon as one of those pieces came back. He was a late in last week because of Adam Chera having one of those hamstring injuries. And you didn't really feel the absence of those other hamstring injuries either in Mitch McGovern or Adam Sod. And even with Zach Williams taking a knock to his Achilles, the other Blues smallest lifted, Jordan Boyd, ended up taking on that one-on-one matchup against Toby Green, his first big one-on-one in a while. And he won that to the point that he caused Toby to get pissed off at him, throw him down to the ground, and then later on get suspended for what could be questioned under last year's rules, I guess. But considering he turned his shoulder into the contest, I think that one's going to stand. I don't think it's a matter of Toby tax there.
I want him to try to use the good guy excuse on this one.
Toby Green's a good bloke. He's only had unfurls Taurus scroll of his MRO offenses. Oh yeah, also Jesse Hogan punched Lewis Young in the face.
So this could be a very different looking team next week in Canberra against the Lions.
Already no Cornelio, no Taylor for that still, I believe.
Has that been confirmed or is that just speculation?
I think it's been confirmed. And as of now, no Toby Green or Jesse Hogan either. So definitely a couple debut opportunities from there for Greater Western Sydney.
Is Max Grzyzewski?
Is it Grzyzewski, Grzewski, Grzewski, Shishevsky, Albin? Nah, he's not Swedish.
I don't care. It's Albin.
And the other one would obviously be Darcy Jones, who's just been building up fitness and form in the VFL and slots into that half-forward flank group alongside Toby Bedford and Brent Daniels, who I would expect to maybe get a bit more time further downfield, occupying a deeper matchup in Toby Green's absence. And I wouldn't mind that look. I just want to back in Benga to do anything and everything at this point. But yeah, that's going to be an interesting looking list for the Giants and a tough one to win on Anzac night. Yes, Thursday night. We got 2 Anzac Day games this year, the traditional and then a capital clash. I like this a lot. 9 games this round with no overlaps. Unless there's like a lightning delay or something. Don't you dare.
Oh no! Oh no!
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today. We're on Twitter at Americans Footy. We're also on YouTube and Instagram and stuff. I actually posted a video to Instagram.
As well as Twitter.
You can find me individually on Twitter at Castle Media. You can find Brian Harambe on Instagram at Cat Named Brian.
He's been acting pretty strange today.
I hope you've gotten some of the background noise of him just like running around. He seems to have settled down for now, huh?
Yep, just underneath your bed, I believe. And I am on Twitter at BenjaminHK01.
Usually his settling down time, he goes up in the window, but he's just chilling under the bed.
Brisbane Lions, 4-13-37. Defeated by Geelong, 9-9-63. I think people have probably seen the video by now, Ethan.
My video? Or the lizard?
Both, honestly. Well, Nick Blakey wasn't seen at training in Sydney, so very appropriate that the lizard showed up at the Gabba instead.
Big fucking lizard.
Yeah. That's just Queensland for you, I guess. Just the weirdest flora and fauna imaginable. Maybe not his fucked up creations, but like all of his first drafts.
Yes. When I look up lizard Gabba, it's not the first couple results. The first couple results that come up are about a lizard that appears in Yo Gabba Gabba.
Call it.
Where Ike wants to tame Fufa Strange. Yeah, so there was a lizard in the upper level. I think it looked like, probably like a foot long?
I don't know. Almost as strange as a pig at full forward at the SCG.
Is that what's that a reference to?
Some guy let loose a pig that had Tony Lockett's nickname and number on it at a game one time.
Was that supposed to be like offensive to him?
I don't know, but it was Pluggo the pig.
Maybe it was a monitor lizard. I don't know.
Whatever it was kind of freaky. But yes, the Lions scored 1-5 in the second half.
So the TLDR version of this game is one team handled the conditions and adversity better than the other.
And unsurprisingly, it was the Cats because they tended to do well in the wet in the past few years.
I'd still say it is surprising because
the Lions are now 0-3 at the Gabba.
Yeah, this is the first game that the Cats played that I really didn't feel they had a shot at. Even the game against the Crows, I gave them like probably, I don't know, a 45% chance of winning, maybe 40. This one, I put it 20%.
Shows how much we know.
Well, no, basically two things happened. Oscar McInerney got concussed, and that ended up having more damaging effects than Tom Stewart getting concussed. And just Brisbane didn't know how to play in wet conditions, which is amazing considering they're in like the most humid place possible most of the time.
Yeah, I find that very strange. Also, Mark O'Connor saved one of his best games once again to go up against Lachie Neale.
That's just what he does. It was fun. He really got under his skin. I think just the Cats were the more mature and more composed team. You saw Cam Rayner getting rattled at times. You saw with Lachie Neale a bunch. The Lions let things bother them, and the Cats didn't.
Tyson Stengel not bothered by the conditions at all.
I think he was the best player in this game. He did such a good job of managing the conditions, handling the ball cleanly, 2 goals off 17 disposals.
11 of those contested, never made things easy for himself, just worked through it all.
He was playing like it was dry. I think you could say Zach Guthrie, that applied to him as well.
Guthrie and Max Holmes both. Holmes maybe the best two-way player in the game between his intercepting and his role in forward chains.
But yeah, once McInerney went down, this was not a game where the Lions went super tall with Darcy Ford, and it had a profound effect. They tried Josh Dunkley as ruckman a couple times. They had Joe Danaher do it a bunch. I was surprised they didn't do it more with like Jack Payne, and I don't think they tried Darcy Gardner there at all. That's probably who I would have gone with, is Gardner, just because I think it has the least effect on the play around the rest of the ground. But McInerney was kicking Toby Conway's ass.
The first hiccup of Toby Conway's time at AFL level.
And then the moment McInerney went down, Conway did his thing. He still only had like 9 disposals, but 41 hit-outs will do. Geelong won hit-outs 65-35, and Conway had 8-2 advantage. There was an interesting discussion on the post-game chat where, Brisbane ended up with 42 more disposals. The question was like, were the Cats content with just the Lions getting the ball first so that they could be the ones to lay tackles and kind of induce the physicality? Because,
I mean, it makes sense, especially in, not just in the context of this game of the wet conditions, but I guess that actually just kind of exacerbates how important the turnover game has always been. I think has just risen to prominence in terms of analysis as well. The most goals in the modern game are generated off turnovers. And so sometimes it's the right move just to give up that first possession if you have players who are immediately able to swarm, if you have numbers ready to counter, and the Cats had that. I had a comparison. I've seen this in high school basketball a few times, where a team just gives up the opening tip-off, and then, the guy who's standing in there for it just immediately drops back into defense, and you have the possession arrow. And just Geelong's depth won out. I mean, the Lions had the top 6 guys in terms of number of disposals, and it meant, nothing. Just the depth of the midfield was better. It was a quiet night for Kai Loban. Brandon Starcevich didn't do much of anything. Who didn't have great numbers, but I thought was actually pretty solid for the Lions, was James Tunstall. I liked his game. They did not handle the conditions or the adversity that got thrown their way well, and they let it rattle them. Also, last year it seemed like the Cats would always run into someone who had been in a shit run of games and all of a sudden just goes out and plays the game of their life. Jack Lukosius has 2 awful games to start the year and then kicks 5, including an absolute bomb.
This year's team, I think they've just done a good job so far of creating their own luck. For example, in this game, Jack Payne was really struggling, and they just went after him more and more, and seemed like every time they went to him, either someone would mark against him, or he'd fumble a handball, or something like that. This was also just not a clean game in general. It was wet weather footy. Ryan dropped a mark that would have been a sure goal.
Neither Hawkins nor Cameron could stick ones that would have ended up getting them goals.
Cameron still ended up with 17 disposals at least.
Yeah, because he's got a lot of impact elsewhere. But this was the first time where Hawkins and Cameron have played together and neither of them have scored a goal. And it didn't matter. No, the one player who actually was able to weather the storm quite literally for the Lions was Dane Zorko, the runaway polished turd winner with a damn solid 26 disposal, 8 mark, 6 tackle game, and a couple of goals. He was good. I think he was the best midfielder, but once again, it's just been different guys throughout the game stepping up in the midfield. I didn't think Tanner Broom was that great. He got a lot of the ball, but wasn't. I mean, even in a game where nobody was efficient, I thought he was especially inefficient, but at least it didn't create turnovers. It was more just it led to another contest, if that makes sense. It's like a handball that leads to guys fighting over a ball more. But I thought Brandon Parfitt's clearance game was sensational. I thought this was one of Mitch Duncan's better games. Jack Bowes, I didn't think was anything special. I think he was just all right, which is good enough. Everyone was good enough. It's not a lot of good enough. It was a crusty seal of approval performance overall, and you had many more Cats players get that seal than the Lions. I mean, outside of, would give obviously Zorko, Barry, Biggo when he was in, Dunkley, I guess, and I would honestly almost consider McInerney for votes, even though he played a quarter and a half. I think them losing him emphasizes his importance more. It was really nice, even though the Cats are now 0-6 in the free kick count, they did get the benefit of one really bad 50 that ended up being a big turning point, where Harris Andrews got popped right away for knocking a ball out of Ryan's hands after a mark. Was that a makeup call for the Hawkins 100?
Yeah, that was awful. Also, just first 10, 15 minutes, they really played like shit, and I thought they were about to get run over, but the conditions and some early inaccuracy helped, because it was Brisbane started off like 2-3, and they finished 2-5 in the first quarter, and it just, there were chances where they could have pulled away, and it was like, okay, we're only down 4. It's our first time trailing at the end of a quarter all year, but we're only down 4, and it could have been a lot worse. But yeah, there were a couple of bad ones. There was one that I can't remember now. Let's see. Well, the last goal the Lions got, the only goal they got in the second half, was off a very marginal push in the back call. One push-up. And then there was a really bad no call, and then immediately they made up for it because Jeremy Cameron clearly pushed Hugh McCluggage before a ball came in and didn't get called at all. So it was like, okay, that evened out. But yeah, Brian got his goal. It was pretty cool. You know, he grew up a Lions fan. He said he hated the Cats growing up. I mean, he really liked Jason Ackermanis. I know that was a big part of it. But he got an important goal to make it 49-35. Then you had the Stengel goal. Then you have the Parfit goal. If he had scored the goal instead of hitting the post with like 6 minutes left, I would have needed a towel.
You were going to end up like Randy Marsh.
Yeah, that would have been amazing. But still, it was an important point to go up more than 4 goals. And that was about it. Yeah, just like I said, create your own luck. Through 6 games, Jake Kolajashny remains at like 1 really bad turnover. And Zach Guthrie was just like quietly consistent throughout the night, where it's like, at no point during the game did I say like, man, Zach Guthrie just did something awesome. But then you look back, you take a step back and look at the whole game, and it's like another really just rock solid performance. They're not beating themselves.
Western Derby. What the hell? West Coast Eagles 16-9-105, defeating Fremantle 10-8-68. Welcome to the Harley Reid Show. 3 goals. Amazing mark. I'm just going to say that right now. That is your mark of the week. I question him staying at forward so much, but damn, it worked. And
how did he not get the Glendinning Allen medal?
Because midfielders value midfielders, and David Mundy gave the votes to Elliot Yeo.
I do like that they actually, like, instead of just presenting the trophy, they actually gave, like, the vote count. You see, other people didn't like that. I thought it was neat.
Just to make it different. I think it might just be the Eagles MC that does that, though. I don't think they did it last year for Freo.
I don't know, but this was an ass-kicking. It felt like a rivalry crowd. It was fun.
Over 54,000 there, and Yeo definitely had the volume in the middle. It's amazing just how much a healthy Elliot Yeo does to this team, and we're going to appreciate it while it lasts.
This was the best game I've seen from an Eagles team depth-wise in a long time. Just a lot of different guys. The entire defense was good. Who was bad in this game? I mean,
quieter from Josh Rotham, but doesn't matter when bad.
I noticed a couple of positive plays from him.
Yeah, well, and he'll need to do more of that because currently Tom Barris is suspended a game for a dangerous tackle of Michael Walters that occurred in the fourth quarter.
Looking at the numbers, I mean, Jack Williams only had 6 disposals, but had a nice mark and a goal. This looked like just
genuinely, who do you take out of this team other than, I don't know, Dom Sheed, even though he hardly did anything because he hardly could as the sub. Alex Witherden makes sense being there in defense again.
I thought he was good.
Thank you. Add some physicality that is really needed on the ground, especially when you've got some of the flyers like Barris and McGovern, and Rotham will have to be like that a bit more, and he ought to be. Oh yeah, small defense. You know where I'm going with this because I have always talked him up and people are finally noticing him.
Brady Hoff.
Freo fans might not know his name yet, but they should.
I think so.
Shut down Sonny Walters. Not easy. And knows when to get outside and play a part in rebound play as well. He really knows when to stay on his assignment and when to leave. His footy IQ is really starting to show. Then when it came to the midfield, it wasn't just Yeo. But it was Tim Kelly, it was Ruben Jinby.
I thought Jinby totally controlled the outside all game.
Going from the center square to the outside, keeping on the pressure the whole time. This is the kind of game that I've been waiting for Jinby because, yes, we know what he can do as a pure tackler. We know what he and the still injured Elijah Hewitt can do in that respect. I love seeing him getting outside and getting some run.
The Eagles showed off depth in this game that I have not seen out of them in years, that you don't usually see out of a bottom team. Now, I'm not saying, they're totally back, everything's great. nothing's going to go wrong. The rebuild's finished. But I think we can officially say they've moved past rock bottom. Like, this is still a bottom 4 team, probably. Yes. But there's, like, signs of life. And I think we're now at the point where when you play them, at least at home, you should still expect to win. But when you go out to Perth, you should know that, like, that's going to be a tough 4 points to earn. Freo. So I think they were ready to do it first. And then they didn't convert on a couple of early shots. And then Jai Amos got concussed when he fell back into Jeremy McGovern's knee. Yeah, so then you're down him, Switkowski, and Frederick. So you're down your 2 most dynamic guys on the ground and your best mark and kick. And you run, and you manage Matt Taberner. So it really meant that Sam Sturt had to get top forward time. And I like Sam Sturt. Yes, I do as well, but Tom Barris had a much easier time beating him than he did Amos for obvious reasons. And then they didn't make enough out of having whoever out of Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson wasn't in the ruck going forward. Jackson, I would have just had Jackson forward like the entire time. Jackson picked up 1 early and 1 right at the end on the only 50 of the game. Surprising that a rivalry only has 150, but it was in, complete garbage time at the end. And I guess Josh Tracy was fine. Yeah, and I agree with our friend here in California, Gil Griffin, and so many others when we ask why was Darcy on the bench to start, and that's just the beginning for them. Spending the first 5 minutes on the bench doesn't matter to me. You get your rest time whenever. Different guys rest at different times. That doesn't bother me at all. So I think Freo's game plan when something like this, it was a meeting. It's like Longmuir pumping up the team, telling them, all right, guys, we're going to kick the ball around in our own 50 and completely control possession and never let the Eagles have the ball. Yeah! No plan to actually do anything. There's a lot of pointless. It seemed like they were parking the bus and protecting the lead, and they were from the start of the game when they never had the lead. And even if they had the lead, it felt like they were giving Adam Simpson's game plan back at him for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And then meanwhile, when they gave up the ball, their midfielders didn't go back into defense quickly enough. And the Eagles then just said, you know what, let's just keep punishing that by going inside. I love how much they used the corridor, and they got some of their best looks at goal, including set shots off of their corridor use. So here's the thing. I think back to round 1 against the Lions, where it felt like every Luke Ryan touch, everyone was on like a series of strings that were all moving like in relation to him. Whereas this was just static. Nothing happened. It was all stagnant. I was waiting for Freo to move any magnets around at all, and they just didn't. Even as, and this is a quote from a tweet that I made, even as they hemorrhaged contest losses like they were hemophiliacs. Gil and I were both waiting for Michael Walters to be moved inside. Yeah, remember there was the quarter a couple weeks ago, what was it, against the Crows, where he did everything except actually kick goals? Yes, it seemed completely obvious, and it didn't happen. And then, what is Neil Rasmus's development plan? Because even though he got most of the game, no contested possessions when he's a capable goal-kicking mid, and you can use him on the inside, especially now with Jeremy Sharp taking up one of the wing spots, and hopefully Nathan O'Driscoll getting back in at some point to take the other. There's nothing that really makes sense here. There need to be a lot of changes here. Well, some of them are forced, like with Jai Amos going out. Would love to see them get Patrick Voss an AFL debut after we were waiting for him to get one at Essendon last year, and it never eventuated. If O'Driscoll is healthy, gotta bring him in. I would love just the option of having him on one wing and Jeremy Sharp on the other. It also just means the other guys can all stay in the middle way. Exactly like Erasmus, if you actually give him the time to do so. Like, put Erasmus on the inside, rotate Walters through the center, and give Matt Johnson a rest. And then, yeah, I don't think Johnson's been very good the last couple of weeks. It's also just, as guys get back and get healthier, it would be easier to take him out, too. And yes, I would hope for Erasmus to actually get time in the 22, but I get after he didn't engage in contests for him to be sent a message with a demotion, in which case you could see someone like Ethan Stanley or Will Brody coming in. That's not a name we've heard in a while. In terms of, remember 2022 was like, oh my God, Will Brody, what a revelation. And then he's just kind of like faded into obscurity. Yeah, he's just kind of been chilling with the Peel Thunder. And then elsewhere, down game in defense for
Josh Draper and Brandon Walker. I think with Heath Chapman about to come back in, it's time for Draper to maybe end his first stint at AFL level.
Yeah, he and Brandon Walker both struggled.
And even though we kicked no goals for, I want to give Bailey Banfield another shot because he at least actually got the damn ball.
If you told me the Dockers would be 3-3 at this point,
And could easily have been 5-1.
yeah, but if you had just told me they'd be 3-3 without any other context, I would totally see it. I just would have expected them to lose to the Lions and win this one, but it's the nature of all of their games. A convincing win over the Lions outside of the first, 8 minutes. Got off to a bad start and then took care of business against North. Really never got challenged by the Crows. Could have easily beaten both the Blues and Power. And now they need to take care of it. This is a really interesting upcoming stretch for them where the temperature on Justin Longmuir's seat could change very quickly. The last time I said I was the most excited for their game for a round, I really regretted it. But their game against the Dogs this coming week, I think that's a fascinating game on so many levels. Both teams 3-3, right? Both coaches in weird spots. We'll see if Rory Lobb is involved again. Then they play Richmond at the G. Then they host the Swans. Then they're at the Saints, home against Collingwood. Melbourne up in Alice Springs. What a weird stretch. And then out of the bye, they have the Bulldogs again. That was the one that play twice in pretty close proximity, playing the Dogs twice in 8 weeks.
That's Sydney Derby's situation as well, weirdly enough.
Yeah, I don't know. What I do know is they need Alex Pearce at his best, and he did end up with a bunch of marks in this game, but he wasn't as good as usual. And just credit to Jake Waterman on another great game. I thought he was much more just imposing and dominant last week. He still ended up with 5, even though a couple of them were late.
First time he's even kicked 3 goals in consecutive games in his career, I believe.
Here's my question. Is there a way he can keep this going when Oscar Allen gets back? If you can get both of them working, you've got the smaller guy, you've got the bigger guy,
you've got some small forwards who will definitely be able to benefit from that. Think about how Paul Curtis can play off Nick Larkey. I would love for guys like Noah Long to learn some of that same craft. By the way, didn't realize that Noah Long and Harley Reid are friends because they played together with the Bendigo Pioneers.
Look, this was probably a 99th percentile game that's hard to replicate from the Eagles' defense. But I think the midfield and the forward groups have things there that you could replicate. Where do you see this team now? How many games do you think they end up winning? Because a couple of weeks ago, you thought they might go winless. I thought this, at the start of the year, I said, this should be a 4 or 5 win team.
I get up that to 5 to 7.
Can't see them winning too many on the road still.
We could see one freak win at Marvel because that's been the case each of the past 2 years.
But yeah, this is, there's a ways to go to be a real contender to even make finals. But this is a return to relevance and watchability. So hopefully this keeps up. Just because I don't like when any team's unwatchable. I like watching footy. There was something in the crowd in this game that I feel needs to be discussed.
Go on.
What do you think I'm talking about?
Honestly, the only thing I'm thinking of is the super dull "We Have the Magic," the Harley Reid magic sign.
Oh, no. So I noticed it was after a Harley Reid goal. You see the Eagles cheer squad. First off, it's still weird to call them a cheer squad, when you think of cheerleaders in an American context. I don't know what I don't think calling them ultras would be proper either. I don't know what they should be called. Maybe each team should just have their own name. Because I think calling them all something army is just uncreative. So I have a point with all of this. I promise you, this all has a point. So, you've got a bunch of flags in the cheer squad. Some that are various Eagles logos, some that are a checkerboard pattern of Eagles logos and Hungry Jacks logos, and then one that's literally just the Hungry Jacks logo. So I have questions.
What are the sponsorship deals with the Eagles supporters and Hungry Jacks?
Was this placed there by Hungry Jacks? Was the person waving the flag Hungry Jack himself? I think there were a couple of different possibilities here. I think one of them is whether it's because they work for them or were just paid by them to do it. Hungry Jack's paid for someone to do this.
That makes far too much sense that they'd pay to have the flags there, and someone would agree to do it. What's the other possibility then?
Someone who just really loves Hungry Jack and just had the thought at some point, you know what? I'm going to go to this game and I'm going to wave the Hungry Jacks flag. Maybe someone just really loves Hungry Jacks that much.
Nah, I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but we can't rule it out. I'm just fascinated by this, and I have so many questions and so few answers.
I think it's pretty simple. Hungry Jacks agreed with the Eagles and the supporters, hey, we're going to have flags here. We're going to have the sponsorships. That's it. But now wait for somebody just to comment, hey, guys, that was me. I just fucking love Hungry Jacks.
Yeah, I mean, even though, frankly, we don't have a ton of, we're not that active within, like, the Eagles circles, honestly.
Somebody like that would find us.
Yes, I feel like if we post about this enough and really ask around, I think we'll get something out of this.
Like, we kept posting about Mr. All Teams Should Merge, and then we found out, oh, his name's Tommy Flanagan. And he was at the Gather Round again this year in even better garb.
All right, as we get on to Sunday.
Yeah, you remember when you said you were really excited for both of these games?
Well, first, we were already talking about Hungry Jacks. They serve burgers.
Let's fucking go burgers. The most entertaining game on Sunday was at Piranha Park. Coburg finally winning for the first time since, I think, round 19 of their 2022 season, beating Collingwood to do it. A depleted Collingwood team, but extremely satisfying on so many levels.
Coburg 2024 VFL game winners.
And you know what, honestly, I think this might be a good sign for Collingwood supporters. The last team that Coburg beat before that was Geelong in 2022. AFL flag resulted. So did Coburg just confirm back-to-back flag pies?
If they win, that is obviously why.
Such a satisfying rendition of that song, too. Especially because, I mean, that tune's tied into our family history.
Yeah, as for the actual games.
The AFL games, so
Sydney 17-8-110 defeating Gold Coast 8-9-57.
The Matt Rowell, James Rowbottom midfield matchup did not leave a crater in the SCG.
I mean, they did match up against each other, and it was cool.
Rowell ended up being one of the few bright spots for the Suns in this game, along with Sam Closey, Tuke Miller, and in his best game yet at halfback, maybe, Jack Vinda Lukosius. Like, the one thing that went well for the Suns in defense, because it's been a down start to the year in general for Charlie Ballard and Sam Collins, and that was really noticeable in this game, with Will Hayward shutting down Ballard as that defensive board, and Joel Amartey just soundly beating Sam Collins. Actually, you know what? I guess we can add Mac Andrew to the positives because it took a while for Logan McDonald to get going.
Yeah, I thought Mac Andrew was pretty good, but...
Wait. Andrew? Andrews?
Yes, Andrews and Walters play for the Gold Coast, and this coming week, the Gold Coast plays against the West Coast.
Is Dwayne Russell going to be on the Coast Clash? The Coast Clash? Feels like it needs to happen. Just want to say, by the way, I called it in that Jake Rogers got his debut when Mal Rosas went out with his hamstring injury. I just said right away, oh, that's going to be Rogers' spot. You know they want to get games into the draftees right away. It's the first time ever a team has had 4 draft picks and debuted them all before even round 14 of that next season.
He didn't do a ton, but he played.
And had a nice kick, like right on the boundary, maybe out of bounds, to Jed Walter to set up a really nice snap goal. He may have been out of bounds. Walter was probably out of bounds.
Oh no, Walter was in.
Balling it a little bit. Who knows? But yeah, Rogers was out too.
Yeah, that was one that I like to put in the category of it looked cool, good enough for me. But this game kind of showed the ugly parts of what Dimma's got to deal with, where they both played poorly and just looked immature. It's one thing for guys to just not play good games. It's another when you're making mental mistakes and giving away a bunch of 50s and just losing your composure. Like, look, the poor performance, every team will have stinkers. It's that they looked very immature. Ethan Reed giving away a couple of frees and 50s because he was having a bad game. Just stuff that just shouldn't happen.
The behavior was poor. The ball handling was poor. Aside from Mac Andrew, his kicking was better for most of the game.
He did have one really bad one he gave up late. No, it was a Joel Amartey goal. I think that's actually where we can shift over. Joel Amartey, this was easily his most consistent game so far this year. I forget which Swan fans we follow pointed out, maybe Polly Porridge and a few others. But that was nice to see. And I don't care if his rating wasn't that high. I thought Justin McInerney was awesome on the outside. Taylor Adams was good. There were a couple times where it seemed like he was injured because that's just always going to happen with him, but I thought he was good.
Nick Blakey did Nick Blakey things. So the Lizard was prominent twice on the weekend.
I thought he was a lot better as the game went on. Knew that he was going to have that impact, was just waiting for it to really hit, and damn, it did hit. But the best player in this game was Brodie Grundy. You know, teams and individuals both tend to lift in milestone occasions, and it was Grundy's 200th game. They did not cheer him off, but they kind of like clapped him off, I guess. Love that he finally got his first goals with the Swans and outclassed Jared Witz in the ruck from the beginning. It was reminiscent in a way of what he did against Max Gawn in the opening round, where he just got front position right away and then used the greater flexibility with the arm blocking rules for this year to keep that position. You can tell he's a smart player just because immediately he realized the greater liberties that he had under the new rules and interpretations, and he's used that to beat multiple kinds of ruckmen this year. You got the pure hitball types like Witz, you got the craftier ones like Gawn, and he's beaten them both. It's great to see him returning to form to show, yes, he's still got a lot left in the tank. I think he's playing better than he had since we started watching in 2020. I think this is a better version of him than we saw at Collingwood, and maybe that's because he is the standalone guy. You know, there's no like Darcy Camerons or other talls that he's really shared with. But I think, and this isn't true for everyone, maybe it's true for like Oscar McInerney as well, but Grundy clearly is at his best when he's just able to be the guy. Now, there is always a scenario, you know, if he gets hurt in a game, and this is a position where, you know, the most likely position for someone to get hurt realistically. Hayden McLean is the easy one there. Yes, McLean and then Amartey. I watched McLean closely last year because he was my sleeper, and he showed that he still has that second ruck ability in addition to being part of the forward hierarchy. Would you want to? No, but if it's necessary, that'll happen. But that's kind of beside the point here. It's that Grundy is the ruckman for the Swans, and that's the role that works for him. Great field kicking game for the Swans. Truly does feel unfair at times that they have maybe the best field kick from defense in Nick Blakey, and maybe the best field kick in the forward half in Errol Golden. And people can say it's unfair also because they're both academy products. So there. Not much else to say about this one, honestly. It just was. I will mention, I confirmed, well, technically yesterday now, that Travis Mazzana, who's on the path to being the best Australian position player in baseball, because low bar to clear, but he's also projected like top 10 draft pick. You know, there have been a lot of good Australian pitchers. There have not been a lot of good Australian position players. But Mazzana is currently at Oregon State University. They played Cal and actually got swept by him this past weekend. I quickly talked to him for about 5 seconds after the game, and he confirmed he is a Swans fan. So there's that. I'm thinking about how somebody is going to bring that up on a broadcast at one point, and it's going to be a better... Oh, yes. It's going to be a better little mention of the Swans than, was it Don Orsillo during the playoffs talking about Liam Hendricks? Yes, 2020. Yes. Well, Liam Hendricks, you know, he could have nominated as a father-son for the Eagles because of his dad's waffle days. His father played 169 games. Nice. For West Perth, was one of their premiership players. And I knew it was a directional Perth. Yes, but Hendricks grew up a North fan, actually, and Don Orsillo said on the broadcast, his favorite Australian rules team is the North Melbourne Kangaroos. He says they've been abysmal this year. And that's still kind of like evergreen years later. How about that for a transition? North abysmal. Yes, but actually, I'm going to rob you of that transition and just have one closing thought on Travis Mazzana. Barring some sort of surprise, it's going to be between him and Curtis Mead, the Rays infield prospect, for who's going to be the best Australian position player, because, again, almost all pitchers. No love for Luke Hughes in this house. But yeah, North, abysmal, 10-8-68, defeated by Hawthorn 17-11, 113. Hey, Hawthorn finally won a first quarter, and finally won in the first place. Happy Tasmanian timeshare tussle. Geelong 6-0, Hawthorn 0-6 would have been so fun. Even as someone who doesn't like have it in for the Hawks like a lot of Cats fans, just because I wasn't around for that whole stretch of finals against them, it still would have been really fun. So we were deprived of that, which is a shame. Best game for Hawthorn's midfield by far. Best game for Connor Nash. Best game for Jai Newcomb. I thought Newcomb was tremendous. Nash's kicking is still suspect at times. Newcomb grew into the game really in the second quarter and dominated from that point on. And first quarter was Connor McDonald and Cam McKenzie. I thought of those two, McDonald probably was more consistent throughout the game, but I did like McKenzie. There were a lot of guys with M names. Harry Morrison. Harry! He was objectively really good.
Morrison with 26 disposals, 7 marks of the goal, spent a lot of time on the halfback flank, but was smart in terms of when he got into the forward half, knew where to position himself, followed the play really well all over the oval. McDonald did that as well. I noticed McDonald doing that, especially in defense and at the start of rebounds. Yeah, the M names definitely showed up in this one. McDonald, Morrison, McKenzie, McGinnis, effective tag of Harry Sheezel, and I will criticize Alistair Clarkson for this among many other things. He refused to move Sheezel around, didn't bring him into the middle where we know he's plenty capable, and just allowed that tag to just sit.
Well, he still had 26, but he just didn't impact the game as much as we know he's capable of.
He had 10 disposals by quarter time, was limited to about half of his normal output from there.
I mean, look, he's effective in the role he's been used in, but
there's so much more that they could get out of him. They moved one magnet and it was moving Charlie Coleman forward. I was glad to see that, just to try to get some sort of change. With Tyler Sellers remaining ineffective, it's very clear he's not cut out for the top flight right now.
I want to come up with a better comparison because I know there are better pieces of art that I could reference. So I got to think for a minute about like a painting I like.
Pablo Picasso's portrait of Dora Maar.
No, it needs to be like something kind of funny.
Rene Magritte's self-portrait where it's just an apple in front of his face.
No. Ooh, Joseph DeCruz's self-portrait.
Remind me?
It's a meme.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, I mean, it would work as a placemat, but you're not going to use it as a placemat. I know it doesn't roll off the tongue like, using the Mona Lisa as a placemat, but I think the point gets across. Or it's like using, having the queen in chess and using it like just a pawn. Or maybe not a pawn, maybe like
a bishop.
Yeah, something like that. Like, actually, you can do more with this. That's my point.
You can do more with Harry Sheezel, and we've yet to see that happen. And it's really fucking disappointing.
I want to credit a couple of people.
Bobby Archol for giving a damn.
Yeah, that was like a complete game. He played well from start to finish, and just like, it was nice to see like, hey, that's what this guy's capable of. He can be really good. And I think it might just honestly be a matter of wanting to.
Forward mix in general looked strong in this game, even without
quality of competition had something to do with that.
Yes, but even without Luke Roost or Mitch Lewis in there, I think they got to the right spots. Even though Jack Gunston kicked 1 goal 3, his presence mattered.
Being the guy on the end, it opened up stuff for other guys. And as much as I like Max Ramsden and think he's got a bright future, I think Gunston just as that traditional tall, just be at the very end there.
He occupied Biggie Nuon pretty well.
Yeah, whereas like, I think with Ramsden, it's a matter of figuring out how can this guy best be utilized, because I think Ramsden has probably an unorthodox profile, but a really good one. It's just a matter of finding out the place for him, whereas Gunston, there's no mystery to what he does and how he's going to be used. And even at this later stage of his career, he's still pretty good at it. Positives for North, Paul Curtis.
Paul Curtis kicking 3-2, got the polished turd from us. I would say relatively narrowly over Tristan Cherry, who, even though Lloyd Meek had his impact and had 2 goals,
Lloyd Meek 2 goals and 2 assists.
Yes, but even with that, Cherry did a good job as a clearance-getting ruckman, and I don't want to take that away from him.
No, I thought both of them played well. It's like when Jill Biden said they should invite both Iowa and LSU to the White House.
Only this is actually correct.
Yeah.
If the champions get invited to the head of state's residence, where do the wooden spooners go?
North Korea?
No, I feel like you got to choose to go there.
Hard to think. What's the lowest ranking government official? Someone in charge of like mosquito removal?
The mosquito abatement district. That's a thing here.
I feel like we could start there. We can probably think of more, but I think that's a place to start.
The mosquito abatement district.
I'm going to ask people, if the champions go to the White House, where does last place go? Just like, what is the lowest ranking? Oh, I am going to send this off in an email to Baseball Barbacast as well.
Jake and Jordan would devour this question.
I don't think this was the right game to manage George Wardlaw if you want to win one. Maybe they're just so scared after what happened last year when they played to win a game.
Yeah, about that. Congrats to Nick Larkey on his 100th game, had a couple goals. I just am very appreciative of his 9-goal game for all the right reasons as an Eagles member. Awards time?
Sure.
Awards time.
Mark of the week. You got 3 candidates. We have Will Hoskin-Elliott over Jordan Sweet. We have Harry Himmelberg going way over Matthew Owies and in the back of Jack Buckley.
That was in the final minute. I don't think anybody remembered it except when they saw the nominee video itself.
Also, Will Hoskin-Elliott, they spelled his last name with 1 T on the video in like the little banner thing that they throw up.
Way to go, Paul.
I always check, it's with 2 T's. And then you have Harley Reid flying into the back of the pack, kind of hanging on Jack Darling a little bit.
The timing on that, I thought that he went early, but just the actual
I kind of like made his way into the middle of a big group that I thought was interesting. Are you going with Reid?
Finbar Maley in the VFL for North.
Yes. Okay, 3 best marks so far this year. Number 1, Ned Bozeman?
Ned Bowman from the Norwood under 18s.
Number 2, James Willis.
Geelong VFL.
Yep. And number 3, Finn Maley, North VFL. But yeah, I'm going with Himmelberg. It's funny because the mark didn't get the BT treatment like that awesome Rankin goal at the end of the Adelaide Geelong game where he called it a big goal. But yeah, I'm going to go Himmelberg. End of the game, didn't matter, but looked cool.
I think I'm going to still go with Reid because it's a less usual candidate. The actual airtime was really impressive, and just Harley Reid. Your Goal of the Week nominees, by the way, it was Sam Barry in round 5 for the win against Carlton. We thought that Tom Green's was much more impressive, picking up the deflected hit out, but game winners often get that sort of love in the voting. Your nominees this week.
Oh, did we mention that Nick Glostone won Mark of the Week last week? I mean, that was an obvious one, but
I feel like it almost could have gone unsaid, but
I feel like it's still worth, for posterity.
Yeah. Your Goal of the Week nominees. On Thursday, Cody Waitman picked up a Zane Cordy spoil and kicked a 2 bouncer as he ran toward the pocket. On Saturday, Miles Bergman got a clearance for Yvonne Soldo and kicked a monster 45-meter banana on the run. And later that night, Jeremy Sharp ran on from a Sean Darcy handball and kicked just inside the boundary from just outside 50. I think it was kind of slim pickings this week if Sharp was the third of those. I am going to go with Bergman because of how impressive that banana was and because Waitman has kicked better goals.
I'm going with Waitman, although I will say the Bergman goal was impressive because it was a guy you didn't expect. Whereas, like, if Willie Rioli did that, you'd be like, yeah. But yeah, I'm going with Waitman. Main character, I think we have a few decent candidates here. I think you could just go with Harley Reid again.
We don't do that, though.
I mean, you can earn main character multiple times. I think there are a bunch of candidates here.
I mean, we're not quite going with the rising star treatment then, where somebody can't get nominated twice. It was Darcy Wilson, by the way, for round 6. That's a body of work nomination there.
Yeah. I mean, Sam Draper could have been a main character.
I could go with the Hungry Jack's flag, but I just don't think it was hyped up and talked about enough.
So my winner for this one, a fly. The one that landed on Matthew Nick's head. Again, my fascination with it is that he didn't realize it because it was big and it had been sitting there for a while. Like a few years ago, there was a big deal about a fly in Mike Pence's hair during a debate. At least that was like a relatively normal sized one. This fucker was big
and on a dude's bald dome.
All right.
So yeah, that just, I gotta go with the fly. I think it's funny, and I think there's a chance it makes the, little like round preview reel at the end of the year on Brownlow night. We're going to be recording again in less than 24 hours.
Yeah, because we've got Wednesday footy this week for the drawn out Anzac round. We're going to have to turn around quickly from this. So stay tuned for that one, and we gotta be ready to do pretty quickly as well, unlike Frio.
I just want to give you a quick heads up and also just build up a little anticipation. I have a really good pick for main character next round.
Cracks Knuckles. You can find him on Twitter at Castle Media, me at BenjaminHK01, Brian Harambe at Cat Named Grind on Instagram only.
Collectively, we are at Americans Footy, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Bye.
Wow, that was inventive.